Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be talking about certain things that top console Fortnite players do. And what I mean by that is, over the past few days, I found myself really interested in watching highlights and streams of a lot of the top console players. And as I was watching these players play, I started noticing certain differences in their play styles and decision making compared to what I've seen from the top controller on PC players. And since I'm a big believer that console Fortnite is a noticeably different experience than PC Fortnite, I thought it'd be an interesting idea to share the most important differences I noticed, since I know the majority of you guys watching this video are going to be console players. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about are the interesting differences I noticed regarding weapon choices among these top console players, and there were actually a few of them. The first one I noticed is that almost all of these players clearly preferred tacs over pumps. So for me personally, just to give you a point of reference here, I think that at white and green rarity, the tac shotguns are better than the pumps. At blue rarity, it's literally a tie, honestly. It varies on a game-to-game basis depending on how I'm feeling. And for purple and gold rarity, I think the pumps are pretty clearly better. But among the players I watched, here's a rough overview of what I noticed. They would take pretty much any rarity of attack over anything under a purple rarity pump. I saw almost everybody take green tacs over blue pumps, white tacs over green pumps, and I even saw one guy take a white tac over a blue pump on multiple different occasions. Then they would take a purple or gold pump over the blue or lower rarity tacs, but at the same time they'd take a purple tac over a purple pump and a gold tac over a gold pump. Now obviously I watched like 8 to 10 different players, so not all of them followed that exactly, but it seems like when compared to other platforms, the top console players really like their tacs. And I would guess that's because it's obviously harder to aim on console compared to PC, so a spray shotgun is a little less punishing if you miss your first shot or two. The second thing that I noticed regarding weapons is how much these players love to use RPGs. Now I totally get it, especially in competitive, which is what most of these guys were playing when I watched them. The RPG is a very powerful weapon for a variety of different reasons. But at the same time, a lot of the top players on PC value other relatively common items such as floppers, slurpfish, or shield items over the RPG, especially with the lower rarity versions. But in my time watching, I don't think I saw a single top console player drop an RPG for anything. It didn't matter if they had to drop fish, shields, medkits, or anything else. Plus, in a lot of cases where they had, say, 2 bigs and 3 floppers, instead of dropping those, they would instead drop their SMG for the RPG. That really surprised me because SMGs are typically super important weapons for controller players, and it's not like they were only doing that in endgame, because that's a situation where people would drop their SMG a lot. They would do it at the beginning to middle of games and rock with an inventory like AR, shotgun, RPG, minis, and floppers for the entire match. And the final observation regarding weapon choices involves the ARs. So first off, the more obvious part of this is that when it came to the regular AR versus the FAMAS, the rarity didn't matter at all. They would take the regular AR every single time, even if it was white versus blue. But the thing that really surprised me was about half the guys I watched would take a SCAR over an AUG. I think especially with Legacy, the AUG may be the single most dominant weapon in the entire game, at least on PC, but I guess with the weaker aim assist of console, again, a spray weapon gets a little extra boost, and therefore it's a lot more of a debate there. The next gameplay trait I noticed when watching these players play was the effort they made to avoid boxing up and playing defensively. Now obviously, there are going to be times where this is simply an unavoidable situation or just clearly the right play to make. If you get AR'd or shotgun for 120 out of your 150 health, you're gonna have to box up and try to heal. Or if you're in endgame and you're in the safe zone while other people need to rotate in, boxing up and putting down AR shots on the rotators is the right play to make that every good player is gonna do. But then, there are a lot of situations where you could box up and play defensive, or you can get aggressive. A great example I'll give is when a player is spamming RPGs at you from medium range. What some players will do here is box up, replace their walls whenever an RPG hits, and eventually the enemy will either run out of rockets, or they'll be at a close enough range where it's pretty much useless because they'll be risking splash damage. So now, you're basically in a fairly typical box fight with you starting on the inside. And I'm not saying that's bad or even the wrong play by any means, because there are a lot of players that thrive like that. But it seemed like the console players I was watching would do everything in their power to avoid that exact situation. If they were being RPG'd like I just described, instead of hiding and letting the enemy choose when and how he wanted to engage, they would apply pressure back. And that can obviously be done by either firing shots with your AR, ramp rushing, or preferably a combination of both those things. It's a lot easier said than done because when you have RPGs or bullets flying at your face, it can definitely be a little scary, but that seems to be the preferred playstyle of almost all these top players. And when they were forced into a position, like I mentioned earlier, where they had to box up, which enabled the enemy to pressure them from point-blank range, they would always look to edit out the side and build a high ground. A lot of players don't really like to do that because they prefer the close-range edit fights, but I didn't really see much of that from the players I watched. They always seemed like they wanted to get out of the confined space of a 1x1 ASAP, and then they hoped to eventually flip the script and force the enemy into their own 1x1. A possible factor for this is something I briefly mentioned in my last video. One of the best defensive weapons in box fights are spam placing traps when you get pushed, but with how slow and difficult they are to place on console, it's definitely a much less powerful option. The next thing I noticed that I think kinda relates to that mindset of not wanting to play from inside a box is that these players did such a good job of not putting themselves in positions where they needed to execute a super quick edit to either get a kill or not die. For example, when you watch top PC or even controller on PC players play, a technique that you'll probably see a lot is the Mongrel Classic, which is basically putting a ramp inside your enemy's box, quickly cutting it in half with an edit, and then shooting before the enemy can even react. It isn't super complicated, but it definitely requires a level of placement and editing speed that's really hard to achieve on console. And here's a quick little clip of exactly what that looks like. So yeah, hopefully based on that, you can see how that would be very difficult to do on console. Because of that, I wasn't really shocked when I barely saw the top console players using that technique or any other kind of similar advanced editing trick. The only exception I can remember off the top of my head was BH7, but his editing speed is so insane that I think he's more of an outlier than anything else. And the final thing I noticed was how good all these top console players were at tunneling. Tunneling is a building technique that kinda gets underappreciated, especially with controller players, because it's pretty difficult to do and it isn't super flashy. And I also feel that a lot of players only see it as something you can do at the very end of competitive games to rotate. That's definitely the most popular use of it, but it's also super important for mid-game when you want to reposition or disengage from a regular fight. And I talked about it a bit when I covered 60 FPS with a Dream, but I really think being able to tunnel at a good speed without messing up is one of the main things that separates good console players from great console players. Because, trust me, trying to tunnel in chaotic situations on 60 FPS or maybe even lower is actually way more difficult than it may look in creative mode. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down the comment section below. I'm always looking for new, really good console players to watch, so comment down below any names you think I should check out. Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.